Educational brochure and DVD absolutely free.
Find out how cash you make for. Call AAE today.
We're less than 24 hours away from what is expected to be severe in Gaza, and we're learning today about the expected testimony of 3 state whistleblowers, including the number 2 diplomat in Libya at the time of the attack on our consulate on September 11th of last year. According to Gregory Hicks, he tried to get help to the consulate on the night of the attack. Remember, it took place in 2 phases. But he was denied that assistance by the Pentagon. His story contradicts directly the narrative laid out by the administration in the aftermath of the terrorist attack. Killed 4 Americans, 2 at the first location, including our ambassador, and 2 at the second location, including 2 former Navy SEALs. California Republican Darrell Issa is chairman of the Oversight Committee. He would be presiding over tomorrow's hearing, and he joins me now. Mr. Chairman, good to see you again. And so the testimony, as we understand it, from a man named Gregory Hicks will be tomorrow that he did seek help as the consulate came under attack. And as I mentioned, it happened in 2 phases. The first was at the consulate, but the fighting continued at a CIA annex, and that is where 2 former Navy SEALs lost their lives. This administration has said that no one was ever told to stand down, that all available resources were utilized to help those involved in these attacks. As it looks right now, Mr. Hicks directly contradict that. Is that your understanding?
That's correct, Megyn. And Mr. Hicks has already given sworn testimony, so many of the things have been asked and answered with both Republican and Democrat in the room. That transcript, the basis for this hearing, in which for the first time people actually involved will be testifying rather than secondhand hearsay that has proven to be consistently wrong.
Why would they tell a C-130 that it needed to stand down rather than go and help those who were coming under attack in Benghazi?
All we can find out so far, Megyn, is that the 4 individuals who were told to stand down to get off the aircraft were Department of Defense individuals, and that it was a problem that they were perceiving of not wanting armed U.S. military to go in relief of these men and women in distress, both in the consulate and obviously in the annex. And that's one of the great questions, along with questions such as why wasn't there any attempt at any response, or at least trying to get permission to respond with jet aircraft or other assets for 7.5 hours as these men died.
One of the most startling things that has come out recently is the chain of events with respect to the talking points, the now infamous talking points that led to our UN ambassador Susan Rice going on all 5 Sunday talk shows and telling us that this was not pre-planned, it was not premeditated, and seeming to downplay any connection to al-Qaeda or terror, a narrative that would be continued by other administration officials in the weeks after that. I want to talk to you about those initial talking points. The initial draft, and it's recounted very nicely by Steve Hayes in the Weekly Standard this Sunday. The initial draft of the CIA's talking points, let's put it on the screen so the viewers can see it. This is from the CIA. This is from the intel. This is what they wanted Susan Rice to talk about first. We believe, based on currently available information, that the attacks in Benghazi were spontaneously inspired by the protests at the U.S. Embassy in Cairo and evolved into a direct assault against the U.S. consulate. Now, let me just start there, because after state and others got their hands on that draft, one change was made, many changes were made, but I just want to call the viewers' attention to this next change. Let's pop it back on the screen, because attacks suddenly got changed to demonstrations. The demonstration, look at this, the currently available information suggests that the demonstrations in Benghazi were spontaneously inspired by the protests at the U.S. Embassy in Cairo and evolved into a direct assault against the U.S. consulate. So this, to me, explains some of the confusion that evolved by Greg Hicks and others about who on earth started talking about demonstrations, because there weren't any. And now it appears, Mr. Chairman, you tell me, that attacks was changed to demonstrations at the behest of the State Department.
Well, either that or people in the White House. It's very clear, though, that this was a political change, and one that flies in the face of 2 other statements. The last statements made to Gregory Hicks by Ambassador Stevens, in which he said, Greg, we're under attack, and the actual statements made by the president of Libya on those Sunday talk shows on Face the Nation, in which he called it a premeditated attack, said that September 11th was a chosen date, and Ambassador Rice managed to contradict the president of our host country.
Okay, I have that queued up. I have the part, the president of Libya had just said that, and then Bob Schieffer asked Susan Rice to respond, and here is what she said. Listen to her on CBS Face the Nation.
You do not agree with him that this was something that had been plotted out several months ago?
We do not have information at present that leads us to conclude that this was premeditated or pre-planned.
Okay, but I want to ask you, Mr. Chairman, because both of those, both the initial draft by the CIA and then the modified draft by the CIA, has the CIA saying that these were spontaneously inspired attacks or demonstrations, spontaneously inspired by the protests at the U.S. Embassy in Cairo, and they evolved into a direct assault. So is she, consistent with the talking points by saying we don't have information that it wasn't premeditated? In other words, it could have been not premeditated, it could have been spontaneous, and nonetheless carried out by al-Qaeda.
Well, one of the challenges is, at that time, the CIA didn't know how far in advance they were planned, nor was that particularly important. What was important was the CIA made it clear that al-Qaeda-linked elements could and were probably part of the attack. That's all you really need to know, is this was not a demonstration in which a building caught fire. This was, in fact, an attack on this compound and then on the CIA annex, and that it was done deliberately. And of course, the last words of Ambassador Stevens to Gregory Hicks will always, I think, ring to the American people. Greg, we're under attack. Not Greg, there's been a protest. And Mr. Hicks goes out of his way to say there was a back door out of the consulate. The ambassador was a very skilled career professional. If he'd seen a protest, he'd have gone out the back door and he'd have been gone. That didn't happen because there was no warning. This was an attack that did not begin with a protest. As far as we can tell, this is an attack that began clandestinely, in which they essentially made their attack at the same time as compromised individuals who were supposed to be part of the guarding of this consulate disappeared. So they came right through the gate, attacking without warning. Now, that's what we believe to be true now. That's what the CIA had as far as evidence.
And I want to show the viewers that. I want to show the viewers that because for weeks we were told by various members of the administration who downplayed the terror angle or refused to be explicit in their comments on whether this was an actual terrorist attack. The president made some passing reference to terror in the Rose Garden the day after, but refused to go that far when he was asked by the ladies of The View, and other top officials refused to go that far. And notwithstanding all of that we all witnessed, they had in hand, a couple of days after the attack, this briefing by the CIA, which got eliminated. Look at the talking points that were eliminated before Susan Rice went on the Sunday talk shows. This is from the CIA, their initial draft. There are indications that Islamic extremists participated in the violent demonstrations. The agency has produced numerous pieces on the threat of extremists linked to al-Qaeda in Benghazi. And then since April, there have been at least 5 other attacks against foreign interests in Benghazi by unidentified assailants. And our information, Mr. Chairman, you tell me what we should expect tomorrow, is that Victoria Nuland of the State Department voiced her, quote, serious concerns about that draft to the White House, said this would lead to Congress using the talking points to criticize the State Department for, quote, not paying attention to agency warnings. They cleaned it up. She said, we're still unhappy. And then she finally said that you still have not, quote, resolved all my issues or those of my building leadership.
Well, and that's the sort of the smoking gun here, Megyn, is that you had somebody who may or may not have known just how inept security was leading up to this. But we had testimony on October 10th, including Eric Nordstrom, that made it clear that they had been denied security requests, that even the ambassador on September 11th said it was a question of not if, but when there would be an attack. That the State Department did, in fact, botch security, trying to make it look normal rather than trying to protect the men and women of the State Department. So that cover-up is undeniable, and I think that's one of the smoking guns. But it still doesn't explain the president misleading the American people over a period of weeks.
In your opinion, and it could be neither of these, but was this about Hillary Clinton trying to protect herself and her own political future? Was it about Barack Obama trying to protect himself and his political future? Or neither?
But clearly it was about people working directly for the secretary, people working directly for the president that led to this. Now the question is, since the secretary and the president have sort of stood behind and allowed these people who made false statements and false allegations to continue to keep their jobs, the question is, where's the accountability for lying to the American people? And I use that word very carefully. The American people were lied to, and today the defense of the administration is that they changed these talking points because they were protecting classified information. I challenge the administration to come forward and tell us what they were protecting other than their own backsides.
Darrell Issa, we will watch with great interest tomorrow. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Megyn.
Taking your thoughts on it. Follow me on Twitter at Megyn Kelly. Up next, 3 brothers are now in custody, accused of holding 3 women in captivity inside their home for years. But could others have known about this? What are the likely charges?